Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 73 of the Cloudcast. Tonight we're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. One of the things that Aaron and I have been trying to do more and more lately is, as much as we hear about what's going on out in Silicon Valley or in Austin or wherever, we're personally trying to get more and more connected to what's going on around RTP. RTP is kind of a small technology hotbed. There's all sorts of interesting stuff going on. And one of the things that we've been doing a lot lately is getting engaged with the Triangle DevOps group, which is a group here. It's the group's run by Mark Mazik, who works over at OpsCode, the chef guys. And one of the things that we did a couple of weeks ago is I got a chance to sit in a session with our guest tonight, Doug Hairfield. And Doug, welcome to the show, first and foremost.
Thank you.
Doug's manager of systems engineering and continuous integration. So in essence, he's kind of the lead DevOps guy at a company called Bronto Software. And real quick, Doug, tell us what Bronto does, and then we'll jump into why I thought the session that you gave was really, really cool.
Sure. So Bronto is a marketing technology platform built entirely on open source code. And we basically provide a way for our customers to send out marketing campaigns, either email, SMS, social media, things like that. And the big win for them is we give them all these great analytics back so that they know how successful their marketing campaign was and can buy revenue. Did this campaign convert to a sale on my website, things like that.
Okay. Cool. So in essence, your whole business is driven around technology. This isn't just a side IT piece of it.
Absolutely.
Okay. And your role in that is sort of clarified for folks, because the way you explained it was sort of unique. There's a sysadmin piece of it, but it's much more than that.
Yeah, I have. I kind of laugh about it periodically that I think it's partially a product that I've been at Bronto for almost 6 years and started when we were 15 or 16 people. But I was the first sysadmin there. But now I manage a team of systems administrators that are responsible for basically if it blinks or beeps in the corporate office or in the data center or the production network, it's on us. But I'm also responsible for the continuous integration or quality assurance department as well. So it's kind of a weird combination, but it's really allowed me to bridge two diverse groups and actualize all of the benefit that those two can have upon each other. Because QA needs a lot of help from systems to kind of understand how things go together and how they work differently in production as opposed to dev or stage. And all of the benefit that, maybe like a traditional department like systems administration hasn't really processed a lot of stuff through a QA department like software dev has in the past. So through some somewhat serendipitous events, I am responsible for both of those great teams. I have a lot of great people that I get to work with and learn a lot from.
Okay. Very cool. So let me set this up. And actually, before we jump into that, one quick thing, and I think this relates to you as well. So one of the things Aaron and I are doing, and we kind of been doing this weekly, giving folks an update. We're both running in the Krispy Kreme run or the donut run, as everybody who listens to the show knows. Wanted to give folks a quick update. We upped our fundraising goal to like $4,000. We're up to about $3,700. So thank you very much for everybody who's made contributions. And I think, because we always go off and stalk our guests before, I think I've seen pictures of you having run in the race before. Is that true?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. So I've run in almost all of them. One I missed for, I think my first daughter my wife was, it was any day now that was going to happen. So I had to miss that, unfortunately. And then we're going to be out of town this year. But it's kind of one of the things, like every year I eat a dozen donuts and I swear I'm never going to do that again. And I'm right back at it the next year. So I really had a personal goal to break 40 minutes on it, and then they upped the mileage on it the next year. So I blew it out of the water.
Yeah, they moved it from 4 miles to 5 miles. Real quick before we go back to the DevOps, give folks, because we've been telling people this for a long time, give folks a sense of like just kind of how crazy the scene is at the beginning and then in the middle when all the donut stuff's going down.
Oh, it's totally crazy. I mean, it's a unique experience. I'm a pretty competitive person, so I learned early on, be at the front of the pack, and you see people in the wildest costumes, and people just killing themselves to get to the donuts, and then like eating those donuts, like every person is equal there because you really can only eat those donuts so fast, and you see people that are gung-ho and donuts, no problem. And then they realize about a minute into it that eating a dozen donuts is no trivial task. And then you're just, how much, can you just knuckle down and make it back to the finish with that payload of a dozen donuts in your gut?
I know, it's insane. So we're doing it. We'll miss you, but we'll give you the update, a week and a half from now or whatever. So let's get back to the reason we were getting together. So, you started this talk, and I'll give a little bit of background because I don't want to. For folks that are listening, Doug's presentation will put the notes out in the show notes, so you can go back and take a look at it. But basically, you kicked it off, and you were going to talk about how Bronto is using DevOps, and to a certain extent, you were talking about kind of your evolution of this, kind of thinking of how do you make what you do, this mix of QA and sysadmin and all these things better, and you sort of started off, at least for me, this is why it was kind of an aha moment. You started off and you said, I had to start thinking about how to manage hardware as code, and I went, okay, this is, I've kind of heard this before, like I'm interested in the details, but I've kind of heard it before, but I'd always kind of heard it as kind of it was sort of a toolsy thing or a sysadmin thing, and when you started going into like, no, we had to really kind of almost put yourselves in the developer's shoes, not just how they think about code, but like the tools they use, how they think about commits, how they think about scheduling stuff. Like talk about that, because when you talked about that, you were like, I literally think about how I manage the operation of that thing like software. I don't ever think about it as hardware. Like for me, that was a big kind of aha moment. Talk about how you got to that point in your learning cycle, and then let's get into how you guys actually do it.
Sure. So it's like necessity is the mother of invention. We had a very lean shop on the sysadmin side, and Bronto has experienced some incredible growth since I joined. And it's like, how do you keep up? And I think Bill Gates had a great quote. It was like, I'm going to give a hard job to a lazy person because they're going to find the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
And I had this hard problem of like, how do we scale the environment, from the sysadmin side, the hardware and the OS and supporting infrastructure, and keep everything safe and all the lights on it and things like that. And I tried multiple things. I like to iterate on a problem over and over until I solve it. And we tried a number of things. And I'm looking around and I'm just like, a lot of the things fundamentally are the same thing that we're doing. We're trying to get safe changes to production. Like if you don't change anything, it's basically going to run forever.
Right.
And, how do we get these safe changes out there? And I'm looking around and, talking to my friends and the other software groups. And I'm like, these guys are doing this every day and they're doing it safely. And, this is, about the time that DevOps is starting to kind of become known. I'm starting to read the blogs, from Etsy and Velocity is starting to be a big deal. And it's like, maybe is there a way I can make this work? Is there a way that I don't have to reinvent the wheel to solve this problem? And just started iterating on that problem. And the work's not ever over, but I feel like we've made some great strides in solving, getting changes out to production in a safe manner. And that was, really the core problem I had to solve.
Okay. And so just to put things in perspective, like how many, what's in a day or in a week, like how many changes are we talking about here?
Yeah, from a sysad, from the system side, we're making changes to cron tab or just kind of like a configuration component, not like the real, like a Java library or some PHP code or something like that. We found a way to scale it to, almost any development group within the organization is able to make the changes. And so we may be pushing out 10 to 20 changes a day on the Puppet side to just make very small singular changes across the environment. A lot of those, because of the way our application functions to some degree, are simple cron tab changes, but we're also we have a lot of work to do to continue to scale the environment, and we're the sysadmins are cranking out a lot of work, as well as other groups that are working on things like Redis or HBase or Hadoop to constantly get things out there that they're trying to tweak or turn new services up. So we're anywhere 10 to 20 changes a day.
Okay, and obviously in your business, being able to constantly be able to look at the data you're getting back from campaigns, being able to refine that, being able to give that back to customers as new options. You're running A/B tests all the time on what people are going to like. Like, there's a lot of moving parts going on. This isn't sort of the traditional, just lots of transactional stuff. This is analytics happening. This is website UIs having to morph all the time. I mean, it's a pretty complicated thing, even for the size of Bronto. We're not saying this is Facebook, but it interacts with Facebook. It interacts with all these sort of online systems, right?
Yeah. It's not a trivial thing to manage. I mean, to be able to send 90 million emails in a day is no trivial feat. Just all the things that go into that. But to be able to provide basically real-time analytics on whatever is also quite a challenge. And to just have the uptime, we do transactional email a good bit now, and just you buy something at Party City, and by the time you get to your car, you have your email receipt is on your phone. That type of performance, and then to be able to provide that data back to the customer is pretty be pretty challenging.
And having done it for marketing campaigns, it's you're looking for numbers, you're looking for something that gives you some sense of how effective it was and what did people do with it, and so very, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about some of the kind of the frameworks that you now have in place. So I know you talked about you guys adopted, you're sort of a Puppet shop. Puppet's helping you kind of drive some of the automation, but talk about the kind of framework of tools that you're using, both from not only how you're making changes and automating changes, but also the way that you're checking in configurations, you're scheduling kind of the synchronization between software changes and sysadmin changes. I thought that was very, very cool.
Okay. Yeah, so we are a Puppet shop, much to Mark's chagrin there. We're not a chef shop, unfortunately. But we're bringing on Puppet a couple years ago was really one of the things that got our kind of put our toe in the water there, because like once you do Puppet, it's like a different type of tool. It's more like object-oriented programmatic management tool, and so it's hard to just do Puppet. Like, you really need to do Get or SVN. We chose to do Get, and then you're kind of already invested in that development. Like you are, and you don't even realize it.
Yep.
And so that makes it a little bit easier to then bring on the supporting tools. Like back when we started, we used Fogbugs and Review Board, and now we made the switch to use Jira and Crucible and Bamboo and all the Atlassian products that go there. So we so by bringing in Puppet and Get first, it kind of made it like software developing, and we didn't even realize it. And then just having the challenges of, we had two basically systems administrators that were making changes at that time. And so the orchestration between those two wasn't very challenging. But, I kind of had this vision that I didn't want to have fiefdoms or silos of information. I thought that was just too old school. That was a very antiquated way to look at things. And I wanted to build it in a way that anybody could use the tools that we engineered to help themselves, because what I was seeing is that, we had this great tool called Puppet that we could make these changes, but there was kind of a steep learning curve at the beginning, and people would just circumvent it. And so I was like, we've got to make it easy enough for people to use. so that was kind of one of the aha moments. It's like, well, maybe if we use the tools and the methods that they already know how to use, it'll make it a little bit easier for them, and there'll be easier acceptance for that. And it's just been a complete win in adoption. I mean, there's a developer almost every day. It's just like, hey, how do I want to start using Puppet to do this change. Like, where's the documentation? Like, get me started on that. And then when they come back and they're like, wow, that is so easy. And like, you have to learn the nuances of Puppet, but everything else I already know how to do.
Right. Okay. So it's really a matter of, finding that middle ground to a certain extent between the kind of tools that maybe part of the team knows how to use, and then trying to cross-pollinate it. It's about, I know you talked a little bit about like just trying to get to sort of common languages. Like, we use, like you said, we use Git you use Git as the repository, I think, for all the development code, but now you're starting to use it for the things that you're using on the operations side as well. I mean, talk about like how that just getting common language between the groups is helpful.
Sure. Yeah, it really was very lucky that at the same time the rest of the development team was making the transition to Git as well. So we've been an SVN shop for many years, and I kind of felt like in a way it was ironic that systems engineering was kind of ahead of the curve on some of the methods for deployment and version control than the rest of engineering. But we had a lot less cruft that we had to deal with, and basically kind of we started using Git really early on with a few other like isolated teams, and we really pushed to get everybody on the same version control. So just, and we didn't really have to, it wasn't hard to make it work. We just had to basically make the decision as an organization that we're all going to be on Git and that we were going to make it work that way. And I made the decision for my teams that we were going to use the same type of bug tracking and review system that the developers were going to use. So when we made the transition to a new system for Jira and Crucible, it wasn't hard. Right. We already had everything in place to facilitate that, and then when everybody's basically using the same tool, they're on the same page. The complexity is greatly reduced.
Right. Now talk for a bit. There was a bit of your talk that was interesting to me, in that you guys use Jira for bug tracking from a software perspective, but you also use it for, I'm trying to remember the exact term, but basically you classified certain things on the ops side as bugs that you wouldn't think of as bugs, but it was a way of saying like, this is like this other thing, and that we have to track it, and we can check off who got things done. What was that? I'm trying to think of how you did it, but it was kind of an interesting way of sort of like calling something a bug so that it would fit into your format, and then you could track it and you could assign it to people, and you could kind of finish things from an ops perspective.
Yeah. I kind of referenced one aspect that change is hard. Like, change is hard for everybody. But changing the way you think about things is even more challenging. The way you have been conditioned in your career to, like, this is how I'm going to solve a problem.
Right.
Like, systems administrators solve it in a very detailed, very step-by-step procedure. Systems administrators typically are very process driven, and they have, the how-to documents and all of that stuff. And to switch over to something like Puppet, it's a little, it's more programmy. It's changing the way you think when you want to solve a problem. Something that, like myself, not being a programmer by trade in the beginning, it's been somewhat of a challenge. But to just any problem that you have to solve, like any change that you need to make, it's just a bug or a feature request, right? Like, it's either a change to something that's existing, or it's just something new. And Fogbugs or Jira, it basically has a field for that. And so it's like, just put that in there, and we're going to assign somebody to it with a severe, like, does it need to get done right now, or does it, can it wait a little bit? And we'll put a due date on there. So it's great for being able to track, resources. We have these things, 2 weeks from now, we have this thing is due tomorrow. So that feature was already built in. And
okay. So you can treat a software bug which has a whole set of conditions for priorities and how fast to fix it, and you can align that to, we need to make these sort of operational changes, and you can tie them I'm guessing probably to releases, sort of business metrics, and a bunch of stuff. If you
right.
sort of put those,
right.
That's very cool.
You certainly can. And different groups within the organization that recognize I need something, I need a little bit of help from systems and systems engineering, they can assign you a bug. They don't just send an email that gets lost into the shuffle or an IM or something like that. And it's something that they already know how to do anyway.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, one of the things I thought that was sort of interesting, and I'm curious about this. So, a lot of times you'll hear folks that do web scale or cloud or whatever, kind of whatever they call it. They tend to sort of say, look, one of the ways that we get to that is we have almost all uniformity, tons of consistency, whether it's at the hardware level or like the software pieces that you're using. But I thought it was interesting. You were talking about, and the group was sort of talking about, you guys have sort of a different environment between what dev's working on, how you test things, how you do staging, how you do prod. And it wasn't just sort of like, well, this group's over here. It was like, this is running on VMware. This is potentially running over in AWS. This is on bare metal. Like, how do you manage that sort of variation? And does that come out of just necessity of what you had funding at the time, or is there, like, how do you manage that variation, and how much problem does it cause, or how much challenge is it with that kind of variation?
Yeah, we so a lot of that came out of necessity at the time. It came out of new people that were coming to Bronto, new engineers, and what they were familiar with. I'd never really used EC2 until our really smart guy Jeff Turner came on. And became our director of development, and he had already been playing with EC2.
Okay.
And so we had a challenge to stand up Hadoop and HBase and things like that typically require a lot of space, and you really need kind of a larger number, a larger minimum number of nodes. That at the time when we had a very lightweight VMware infrastructure, that EC2 was, it was just so easy to set these up and shut them down when you needed to. And I was able to kind of architect some, I guess, glue to integrate those two environments so they seemed like they were on the same network. And so we continue to operate in that capacity to just look at the function of this thing, whatever this new component was, and it's like, where does it fit in better? Is this better to run on VMware, or does it run better in EC2? And, what are we going to have to do to kind of stitch it together? So it was basically taking the role and fitting it into an appropriate infrastructure.
Okay.
I will say in all truth that we're probably going to pull out of EC2 in the next couple months for our kind of our HBase Hadoop infrastructure, because it's proving, like, some of the things like the latency in between the two is proven to be a problem. And so one of the lessons learned is choose the right fit at the time, but requirements change and businesses change. Like, what we can do now as a company of 150 people is different than what we could do as a company of 30 people.
Right. Right.
And don't be afraid of that change. That
okay.
You have to set this up now, but a year from now things may be different.
Yeah, no, and I've heard that quite a bit from people who, and this isn't a knock on EC2. It's like you said, like, at the time it was the right tool, or it was the right scale, or it was the right price point, whatever it was, and then either your expertise is growing enough to where you don't leverage some of their services, or, like you said, the latency didn't serve the business. And so yeah, we've seen, I've heard that quite a bit of folks who are kind of in these hyper growth modes, or they're in hyper growth markets, and it's like things change and you just kind of have to be able to deal with it. And so
yeah.
So in terms of kind of, and I think you did a really good job of explaining that. In essence, what you said was like, look, we just need resources. And there's times when we need a lot of resources, and there's times when we need, resources that are latency sensitive, and there's times when we need other kinds of resources. So were you then using like Puppet to sort of manage across all those things so they looked somewhat seamless, or was there like a whole nother level of kind of tooling you had to put in place to make that look somewhat seamless?
Yeah, we leveraged the EC2 API to be able to, basically, we set up multiple environments as this dev, as this staging, as this EC2, as this production. And then we just basically said, we need this server. This is the environment, and go build it, Puppet.
Gotcha.
And didn't really matter where it was. So it took a decent amount of tooling and some skill set uplift to be able to do that. But the flexibility that garners in the long run is quite beneficial.
Okay, very cool. So let me ask this, and I have one real question and then one sort of last question. So obviously, what you guys are doing, it's all open source based. It's what you're doing at Bronto is the business. It's not a side part of the business. It's not IT on the side. Can you imagine if you were just running sort of the IT part of some business? You were over at John Deere making tractors, or you were working at the bank over at RBC or something like that. Like, can you imagine if all the applications weren't sort of modern? Is the same methodology useful, or is this really kind of unique to open source, continuous change kind of environments? Or what's your thoughts around that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say I give like the best answer. It just depends, right? And yeah. I don't think that it's quite as dependent on the technology stack that you have. I haven't worked in a Windows shop in probably over a decade, so I can't speak as accurately to that as the more the open source side. But really, the biggest hurdle that I have seen just from colleagues in the space is just overcoming like the mindset of the people that work there.
Yeah.
That, hey, we're going to deploy 5 times a day, or we're going to deploy every day instead of once a year. That, that blows people's minds. They can't handle it. And, it's, I think that really speaks to a lot of the soft skills that can be required in our industry, that, you know how to evangelize this idea and to show that this idea works, that DevOps is a very viable means, and it's a more productive and successful means than these monolithic once a year releases that a lot of companies do, that Bronto used to do.
Yeah.
I remember back, it's not been that long ago, a few years, when twice a year we did our release, and you're up all weekend and things like that. And the times that we've backslid a little bit and we don't release for a couple of days and we stack a bunch of stuff on top of each other, those are the releases where we see problems. It's when you iterate over these small changes, but getting people to drink the Kool-Aid and to be able to get them to understand how it's such a benefit.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest challenge.
Okay. So you guys literally went from a twice a year deployment to literally like every day, multiple times a day.
We did, yeah. And we have multiple repos that we may deploy like one repo twice a day. We may deploy, one repo once a day. We may be doing, just on the code side, 3 or 4 deployments a day. On the Puppet side, it's much more lightweight. It's much more new, with a lot less cruft. So we may be doing, a dozen deployments a day.
Wow.
And a lot of that's come about with the tooling that we've been able to craft in systems engineering for making it very easy. We don't have a lot of heft that we have to overcome.
Right. Cool. Well, very, very cool. I'm gonna throw out one last thing and just give me an opinion. And again, I really appreciate you kind of diving into this stuff for folks that are kind of interested in the DevOps side, and especially in the sort of like how did you transition side. I would highly recommend Doug's presentation, and like the kind of the what he went through it feels very much like things that other people could adapt and kind of take a look at. So one last thing, we've had a lot of folks on the show who, are startups out of Silicon Valley, or, you hear about a lot of things that go on out there. Obviously, living out in California, really, really expensive, different sort of lifestyle out there in terms of quality of living, or, cost of living and so forth. Talk about the DevOps kind of community around RTP, because there's a lot of very cool things going on here in a place where you can live very affordably. The weather's great. We're right near the ocean. So for folks that are kind of into this scene, but maybe are in California, something like, talk about what the RTP kind of DevOps community is like, both in Raleigh and Durham and everything.
Okay, yeah, sure. It is a little bit new, but there's some really great people on there and some really cool technology. I have a few colleagues at different organizations, and you have some, a group of people that you can bounce ideas off of that are really sharp, and or go grab a beer with after the meetup, and they're working on cool technology, and it's 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 nowhere on the scale of Silicon Valley, but
No.
it is kind of nice to have a little crew of people that are kind of all working towards that similar goal.
Yeah.
That
and there's shops that, like you guys, that are doing stuff on a huge scale. And there's folks working for like Mark at Ops Code, and Mark Imbriarco's over at GitHub. He's driving cool stuff at GitHub, and there's a lot of folks that are doing some there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of former Red Hat DNA, I think, that's floating around the area. Is that fair?
Definitely. That's a very fair statement. There's a lot of people that have worked in companies that have had very humble beginnings that have become very successful. Red Hat is an excellent example, and they want to experience that startup feel again. And so you have places like Bronto that spring up, and there's others within this area. It's just a real hot spot for new ideas. Like Argyle Social is another one that springs to mind. Those guys are doing some really cool stuff. They're a chef shop, coincidentally. But it's a real hot spot. I mean, if there's a technology that you're really interested in, you can definitely find it in this area without having to pay, possibly like 7-figure for a house. So
yeah, cool.
I'm a big fan of this area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good bunch of folks, and the stuff that you guys do on a monthly basis is very cool, and it's very open, and so I very much appreciate you coming on tonight. I think we'll have to, hopefully folks like the show. I think we've been trying to get more and more content around this kind of stuff, and we'll have to try and get some more folks from the Triangle DevOps group on the show, and hopefully I can have you back again on sometime 6 months from now when you've learned a bunch of other new cool stuff that you can share with people.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. So, folks, that's the show for tonight. We really want to thank Doug for coming on, as usual. So, one last thing, Doug, if folks want to follow you on Twitter or see the cool things you're doing, where can they find you?
Sure, I'm Knuckle Sandwich on Twitter, and I love to talk to people about this type of thing. Like anybody has any questions, I'll be more than glad to discuss or share my ideas or lessons learned, or I'd love to hear about some things that people have done that are very similar or different ways that they've attacked the problem. So just hit me up on Twitter. I'm on there.
Very cool. Very cool. So, folks, again, as always, if you like the show, tell a friend, give us a review on iTunes. You can always find us at the Cloudcast.net on Twitter, and obviously all the other social media places off of our website. So, for Doug and for Aaron, who'll be back next week, thanks for everybody for listening, and have a great night.